I'm really glad that you all decided to come. And Ken, I'm going to need you, so don't go far.
I'm
You'll
here.
see what I'm talking about in a minute. But we're talking about success for the season search, the benefit of being overqualified. And what I want to know is how many of you have ever been told that you are overqualified by somebody? If you could just raise your hand or something like that. And Ken, would you let me know what that's looking like? Because I can't
Yes.
see any of that. I can't see any of you anymore. Yeah.
I may need
People
Zoe
giving
to
the
tell
thumbs
me
up. Some people use the raise hand feature.
No, that's fine.
Some
So
people
do
wrote
you,
in the chat.
yeah, are you seeing a lot of people, Ken?
Yeah.
I'm going to ask Zoe to answer that because I don't know where to look for that.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
seeing a lot of people with either a thumbs up, raising their hand.
That's good. All right. Now I'm going to ask another question. How many of you knew you were overqualified on an interview and weren't told that, but you were sitting there and you knew you were overqualified? How many of you have that?
A lot of hands raised again. Thumbs
Okay.
up signs. Yep.
So that is exactly why we're here today, because of this, that most of you have experienced this. So let us move forward. So anyway, I know that Ken read my bio at the beginning, and thank you for doing that, Ken. So my name is Abby Kohut, and I've been a corporate recruiter in human resources now for about 26 years. And what that means in human resources is I'm not a staffing recruiter, so I'm not like a search firm per se, but I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that later, because now I'm doing a little of that as well. But I have been in HR doing recruiting for 26 years now. And what happened was along the way, I started to get really frustrated because when you're a recruiter, you can't tell people the absolute truth. So I was taught by the legal department that you kind of need to tell people, we found another candidate that was stronger, or you just don't tell people the absolute truth. You don't tell them exactly why they didn't get the job. So you can't say, well, you messed up that question, or something like that. So that was frustrating to me. And that's why eventually in 2009, I decided to become Absolutely Abby. And I set up my website. And I've been doing that ever since. And it was a great thing to start because I became a speaker in New Jersey. I wrote a couple of books and all was well. But then one day I had this goal that I wanted to help 1 million job seekers. And that's because I felt like I had rejected 1 million job seekers. And I thought, let me go around New Jersey and find 1 million people. Well, it's hard to find 1 million people in New Jersey to come see you speak when you're a new speaker. So one day I decided it wasn't enough. I wasn't finding enough people. So I thought, let me take a trip around the country and find the people that I want to help. So I got into this RV. This is the exact RV. And I drove around the country. I had a driver. We drove around the country. And we did this for 5 years. I actually quit my recruiting job in order to do this. That's how passionate I was about doing this. And I drove around the country and I managed to get to, I think it was 35 states. And I was able to help a lot of people. So that was my mission, to help 1 million job seekers. And people always ask me, how many did you reach? And I have no idea. Because what happened is I would go to a group like today, I'm going to tell you a bunch of my secrets, and then you're going to maybe tell someone else one of the secrets that you learned from me. So I should count those extra people, right? So I never was able to count how many people exactly I helped along this journey, but I know it was a lot and it was great. It was so much fun. I mean, I met wonderful people along the way, and I crossed the country 3.5 times. So I went to California 3 times, and it was just a lot of fun. But anyway, that is my story. That's my whole bio. So, and it's all about teaching people the absolute truth. So a lot of people ask me for my slides during my presentations, and I'd like you to have the slides. And the best way for you to get them, and the easiest way, is to send me an email. And this is the email address. It's slides@absolutelyabby.com. And if you just send the email there, it will automatically bounce back with the slides. Very simple. And you can reach those slides today, tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. They'll always be there. And remember, this is an email address. This is not a website. Okay, so slides at absolutelyabby.com will get you the slides. All right, so the first thing I want to tell you about is that you all need to become the captain of your own career. And when I say that, let's talk about resumes. So if you were to show your resume to 10 people today, you would get back 11 opinions about your resume. I can guarantee you this. So the thing about it is there is no policeman of resumes. There's no president of resumes. There's no superintendent of resumes. There's no king of resumes. There's no queen of resumes, et cetera, et cetera. There's not one person in this world that can tell you the rules about resumes because there are no rules. Everything about resumes is essentially opinions. And that is kind of frustrating for a job seeker because there's no GPS of finding a job. If there was, you'd all go out to Best Buy and buy the GPS of finding a job. There is no such thing. So there's a lot of speakers out there that make you feel like they're talking in facts and they're really talking in opinions. I'm one of those speakers. So I'm going to be talking to you today. And I feel very passionate about what I believe because I've been doing recruiting for 26 years. So I feel the way I feel, but I want you to know that today I'm going to be talking in opinions primarily. And so I want you to be the captain of your own career. So if I say something and you're like, Abby, that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard, don't worry about it. Just don't write it down. But if I say something that you really like, write it down. And that's really what I would recommend to you is when somebody tells you something, if you don't agree with it, you can ask them, is this a fact or an opinion? And I bet you most of the time it's going to be an opinion because there are so few facts associated with this job search process. All right. So what we're going to talk about now is this definition of being overqualified. And I define it in 4 different ways. Okay, the first one is too much experience. So I'm looking for someone with 5 years of experience and you have 20. That might make you overqualified. And the other one is title. So I'm looking for, let's say, a financial analyst and you've been a CFO. Your title's too high, makes you overqualified. The third one is education. So I'm looking for someone with a bachelor's degree, you have a PhD. And the last one is higher salary. So I'm looking for somebody at, let's say, $90,000 and you're looking for $200,000. That might make you overqualified. The question is, why on earth would an employer not want to hire someone who's more qualified than the job requires? And that is because of fear. And let me tell you what we are afraid of in corporate America. So the first thing here is that you might have a been there and done that attitude, which means you did it 20 years ago and you don't really want to do it again. So you take the job and then you're kind of not really wanting to do it. And then the next thing is we're afraid that you might leave for a higher salary. So that a recruiter calls you and says, remember that vice president job, or remember that $100,000 or that $200,000 job that you wanted? Well, now I have it on my desk. Would you like to come in for an interview? And you say yes, because of course you should, right? So we're worried about that. And then the next thing is that your colleagues and managers might be threatened by you because you are so good at what you do. And then there's also, you take the financial analyst job, but you really want to be promoted quickly. So you complain about that and we worry about that. And then last but not least, we worry that you're going to keep looking, which means you're going to keep the open to work icon on LinkedIn, or you're going to keep your resumes posted wherever they're posted. You're going to continue talking to headhunters. We're worried about all those things. And when you add them all together, we're really worried about this yellow Post-it note, which is the I quit Post-it note. So something about something is not going to work out and you're not going to be with us very long. That is the biggest problem with overqualified applicants in corporate America. So today, I don't like this word overqualified. You don't like this word overqualified. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the word when we talk about it today. So, and this is where Zoe, I'm going to ask for help. What I would like everybody to do is I'd like you to think of a word that we can put in front of qualified and make it a better word. So not overqualified, but what word can we put in front of qualified? Why don't you type that in? And Zoe, why don't you tell me what everybody is telling you?
Absolutely qualified, very qualified,
Mm-hmm.
perfectly qualified,
Okay. These are great.
adequately qualified, super qualified,
Mm-hmm.
another super, uniquely qualified,
Okay, Zoe, who's the one who said absolutely?
absolutely qualified. That was Carol McCullough.
I knew it was Carol. I knew it. So Carol gets a gold star because she's seen this presentation a couple of times. That is what we're going to do. We're going to put the word absolutely in front of qualified. And we're going to say absolutely qualified. And in fact, what I'd like you all to do, you can do it silently or because you're all on mute. So you can do it silent. You can do it. I'd like you all to say 3 times in a row, I'm not overqualified. I'm absolutely qualified. We'll do it together. Okay. I'm not overqualified. I'm absolutely qualified. I'm not overqualified. I'm absolutely qualified. I'm not overqualified. I'm absolutely qualified. Now that you said that 3 times, we have to put the because at the end. Otherwise, it's not going to work, right? When you're talking to somebody. So we'll get to the becauses at the end of the presentation, but at least you know this part. All right, so now that you said 3 times in a row, in theory, that you are absolutely qualified, I'd like to find out what you think are the benefits. And you got to put your thinking cap on this. Why should we hire you, the absolutely qualified employee? So Zoe, why don't you read off what people think are the benefits of hiring an absolutely qualified employee?
No learning curve,
No learning curve, that's great. Mhm.
minimal training needed,
Mhm.
extensive network professionally,
Mhm.
be a mentor,
Mhm.
can help or can offer help beyond the job.
Yep, these are great. Now, all the ones that people just said are true. And I'm going to give you some other ones. So if you take theirs and mine, you have them all, right? And then there might be others. So there could be 20 reasons. But these are the 7 that I believe are the benefits, okay? So one is that you are dependable, loyal, and mature. And if I had you in a room at a live audience, as a live audience, I would say, do you agree or not? And you would all, I would tell you, if you agreed, you should yell out, absolutely. That's what people used to do. So do you agree that you are dependable, loyal, and mature? Absolutely. I agree about that myself as well. And then do you agree that you have a shorter learning curve or shorter return on investment? Absolutely. How about a proven track record of success in whatever you do? I'm assuming that's right too. Absolutely. And then do you have a strong work ethic? I hope so. Absolutely. And then are you a strong problem solver in your industry and profession? Yep, I think absolutely on that. And then do you have a broad range of experience? Whatever that means to you. It could be yes, could be no, but I like it. So I'm going to say absolutely. Certainly works for me. And then being a role model for others earlier in their career. We heard this one. Someone mentioned this. So if you agree with that, we'd say absolutely. Now, this slide in particular is so important for you during your interview. You have to get these points across when you're talking to somebody and you believe that you're overqualified for the job. So remember, you have more experience, more degree, more salary, all those title, all those things. If you are sitting there and you feel like you're overqualified, you have got to get these points across to that interviewer. So I would memorize this slide if you can. And that's why I gave you the slide. So it's real easy to do this. Okay, so next is we're going to develop a 3-part strategy. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to develop the absolutely qualified resume. Then we're going to develop the absolutely qualified cover letter. And then last but not least, we're going to talk about the absolutely qualified interview. But this is the first thing I want to mention. Being overqualified is correlated with age, but it is not caused by age. And what this is about is as you get older, you tend to have more experience. So like when you are 70 years old, you have more experience than when you're 25. And when you're 70 years old, your titles might be higher than when you were 25. So you might be a vice president when you're 70, but you might not be one when you're 25. You also, your salary should be shooting up, right? You should be earning more when you're 70 than when you're 25. And you might even go back for additional degrees as you get older. So this is why being overqualified is very highly correlated with age, but it's not caused by age. You can be overqualified at age 27 or 25 even. You can. But the reason that we're going to talk about age is because of this high correlation. So we're going to cover age and overqualified in the same presentation and nip both of them in the bud. So first, we're going to talk about the absolutely qualified resume. The first is the number of years. So people always ask me, how many years of experience should I list on my resume? Why don't you type those in for Zoe? And Zoe, why don't you tell me what is the right number of years to list on a resume? What is the right number of years to list on a resume?
25,
Okay.
10, all,
Mhm.
plus or minus 15.
Okay. Now, do you guys understand there is no right number? Because all of these numbers are right. They're right for you. If you think you should list 25 years of experience on your resume, then you should list 25 years of experience on your resume. There is no right number. Okay. Now, typically when I went around the country, I heard that most people were saying more like 15 was the right number, but that's what most people say, but there's no rule. So you need to do what's right for you. Be the captain of your own career. So for example, for me, I choose to list all of my years of experience on my resume in certain cases, which is, let me see what year we're in. I think I'm at 34 years of experience now. So I do have resumes that list all 34 years of my experience, yet I do have some resumes that list only about 15 years of my experience. I have two different resumes typically, and it has nothing to do with the 15. It has to do with I've been doing contract recruiting for 15 years. So sometimes I'll just put the contract recruiting work on there. But this is what I'm saying. You have to decide what makes the most sense for you. It's somewhere between 0 and all. That's it. Just pick one. Okay. Now at the top of your resume in your summary, a lot of times people will put, I have 25 years of experience in whatever it is that they do. Like, it's fun to talk about the number of years because you feel proud when, like, I have 26 years of recruiting. I'm very proud of that. So it would be natural for me to put it in my summary at the top. I have 26 years of experience. The problem with that is if I'm applying for a job where they want 5, they're going to see that 26 and they're going to go running. So do not put the big number of years of experience in your summary. And also don't put it in your cover letter. Okay, just don't. You can say things like extensive experience. You could also say that you have 5+ years of experience, even if you have 26, couldn't you? If they're looking for 26 and you have, if they're looking for 5 and you have 26, you also have 5+ years of experience. So you could do 5+ or 10+ if you want, or extensive experience, but just don't put this big number, 25 years. Okay, graduation dates. So at the beginning of time, people used to put their college graduation date. These days, a lot of people are leaving it off. People that just graduated are leaving it off. I think mostly because of identity theft, but honestly, you can decide whether or not you want to put it there. I personally have my graduation date on my resume, and I also have it on LinkedIn. It's 1988. And I do that because I'm really not concerned about this overqualified thing. I believe that if somebody is going to not hire me because I'm too old, then I would prefer us not even bothering with the interview process. Let's just not do it, right? So I don't care if people know how old I am. So I have mine listed, but if you don't want to have yours, don't worry about it. You can leave it off. Some people have asked me, can I leave off my PhD when I'm going to apply for a lower level position? So my feeling on this is again, just purely an opinion, not fact. If I were going to apply at Walmart for a job, and like if I needed a job and I just had to pay the rent and I wanted to work at Walmart, I would not put my PhD on my resume if I had one. I just wouldn't. I might put my bachelor's, but I would not put anything higher than that if I was applying to Walmart. So yes, you can remove your college degrees. When people do background checks, they do not find degrees that you don't tell them about. So no one will know about it unless you tell them about it. So you could leave a degree off if you felt like that was making you overqualified. And in a lot of cases, it will make you overqualified if you have a PhD or a law degree or something like that. Definitely a law degree can make you very overqualified if you're not applying for a job that requires such a thing. Okay. The other thing is, if you're applying for a job where you're going to have 1 or 2 direct reports or 0, I would not put on your resume that you had 50 direct reports. That's going to also make you overqualified because they're going to think that you're going to be not challenged with 1 or 2 direct reports. So I would just say on your resume that you managed a team if you want to say it, or don't, but just don't list this big number of direct reports. Okay, now, if you decide to list fewer years, let's say that you are 70 years old and you decide to only list 15 years of experience on your resume and don't list your college graduation year, you're obviously trying to disguise your age. So if you are trying to disguise your age, I would not have an AOL email address, because people that are in their 20s and 30s and possibly 40s are not using AOL anymore. So I would use a different email address if you're going to try to disguise your age. If you're not trying to disguise your age, don't worry about anything in this bullet. The other thing is an objective. We don't use objectives anymore. Why? I have no idea. All of a sudden, we now use summaries. Don't know who created that. There is no policeman of resumes. I don't know how that happened, but it did. So we only use summaries. So if you have an objective on your resume, we know you're an older candidate. And then references available upon request are no longer showing up on resumes anymore. So I wouldn't list that either if you're trying to disguise your age. And this is going to kind of blow someone's mind, at least one person. Double spacing after periods indicate that you're an older candidate, because the younger generation is not using double spaces after periods because they didn't grow up with typewriters. So if you're trying to disguise your age, you want to make sure that this bullet is all taken care of. You want to have single spaces after periods and all this other stuff not on your resume. All right, so now we're going to talk about the cover letter. So the first thing most of you are thinking, I bet right now you're thinking, Abby, why do I have to write a cover letter? Nobody reads cover letters. So I'm here to tell you that people do read cover letters. The reason most people don't read cover letters is because most people don't get cover letters. It's so rare that I get a cover letter. But what I can say is that if you have the opportunity to include a cover letter with your resume, if it's a job you really want, it's a really good idea, because you look like everybody else. Let's say you want to be a CFO, your resume is going to look just like everybody else's. And if you have a cover letter, it can help you express your passion, your interest, so many things. So this is why I recommend that people send cover letters for jobs that they're really interested in. Now, in the cover letter, one of the things you're going to want to do if you're overqualified is to overcome the objection by explaining specifically why you're interested in this position. And we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but that's what goes in the cover letter. You don't want to mention the number of years, the 26 years of experience. Don't mention that in the cover letter. Now, if you are overqualified, this is my suggestion. Absolutely, definitely mention your salary requirements in your cover letter. Why? Because let's say you're a vice president applying for a financial analysis job. If you are a vice president applying for a financial analyst job, I'm assuming you're earning at least $200,000, if not $300,000, because you're a vice president, depending on the industry. And the financial analysis job is paying like 75 to 90, depending on the industry, or maybe 110, whatever. It's so far off with the titles. So you have to talk about your salary requirement. So if you put in your cover letter, I'm a vice president of finance, blah, blah, but I really want to be a financial analyst, and here's why. And you mention, I'm looking for a salary between 75 and 120, then I might call you. If you don't do that, there's no way I'm going to call you. If you are a vice president, I'm looking for a financial analyst. It's just not going to happen. So if you mention the salary, I might call you. Okay, that's why I say to do that. For those of you that hate to write cover letters, I did it for you. If you would like a copy of the one that I've used all these years for myself, it's a nice, easy one. It's not a T letter, so it doesn't, you don't have to do all kinds of formatting. It's a nice one. You can get it by emailing me at letter@absolutelyabby.com. So you get the slides by emailing slides@absolutelyabby, and you get the letter by sending one to letter@absolutelyabby.com. Okay. So the next thing here is the absolutely qualified interview. And the first thing I want to say is a lot of times we talk ourselves out of the interview success because we feel like we don't have a chance at this interview. And it's because we think that the company is only looking for younger people. Let's say Google, for example, right? Or we think that everybody at the company has pink hair and we have purple hair. There's something about what we have discovered about the company or seen when we went like on a live interview, which is not happening that much right now, but will again happen. And you're walking around the halls and you're seeing this stuff and you're like, there's no way this is going to work. And also I have a bachelor's degree and they wanted an MBA and I don't have an MBA. So this is never going to work. So you talk yourself out of it. But I want you to know that most of the time, let's say 90, maybe even 95% of the time, these are real jobs. And when you get called in for an interview, it's because they actually think you could fill this job. They're not doing it just to waste time, usually. I'm saying usually. So don't get like, if you got an interview, just go for it. See if you can get the job. Also, you want to make sure to dress the part. So make sure you check with the coordinator of the interview to make sure that you have the right attire. So if it's a Zoom call, by the way, I'm doing Zoom calls, mostly Teams calls these days. And it really frustrates me when people show up in t-shirts or sweats or with wet hair. I mean, try to do a good job on the interview wearing the right clothes. I would wear a tie or a collared shirt, depending on where you're interviewing. But you can ask the recruiter, if I wear a suit, will I be overdressed? You could do that. And not should I wear a suit, but if I wore a suit, would I be overdressed? They'll answer your question honestly. And like if you ask that to someone at Google, they'd say, yes, you will be overdressed because you will not get the job if you wear a suit at Google. I'm pretty sure about that. Okay, other things about age. So people ask me all the time, should I dye my gray hair to look younger? My feeling is this: if you feel like $1,000,000 walking around with your gray hair, do not dye it. If you feel like you look old and you just look old with your gray hair, you're disappointed that you have gray hair, you have to dye it. Because when you go in the interview, you have to be really confident. And if you feel like you look too old with your gray hair, it's not going to work. So that's the thing. Do that. Okay. It's very important that you realize that a lot of the interviewers are on the younger side. And that's because the recruiting job is the entry-level job in human resources. So if kids want to get into HR, they go to school for human resources, and then they have to do something first before they get into human resources. So they become a recruiter. So a lot of the recruiters are on the younger side. So if you expect that, it might be easier when you see a youngster. Another thing is it's very important that you don't act very arrogant during the interview. Many people lose jobs because of their arrogance. And a lot of times that could happen with older people because they're so qualified. They're absolutely qualified and they're so good at what they do that they can come across arrogant. So my advice is always this: A lot of times you don't know that you're arrogant, and that's because nobody ever told you that. So what I would do is ask your spouse or your best friend or somebody else that you hang out with a lot and just say, am I arrogant? And if they laugh at you, you probably are. And then what you want to do is you want to find a way to be confident, but not arrogant. You kind of tone it down a little bit. And if you have a career coach, like there are people on this call, work with them on how not to be so arrogant. It will help you get a job. Okay, this is really important. So a lot of times I meet people that can't pay the rent because they're out of work. That's a desperation situation. But when you go on an interview, you have to be passionate, not desperate. Desperate people just don't get jobs. Passionate people get jobs. So you have to talk about why you want this job and not any other job. But you can't talk about that you need a job. You have to not use the word need. Got to talk about want. I really want this job for blah, blah, blah reasons, but can't come across as desperate. Also, it's really important to discuss your active activities, especially if you're one of my senior friends in the room, which I think most of you are because you're at this presentation. It's really important to discuss that you are an active participant in life, because one of the things that we worry about when you get older is your health and your energy. So one thing I used to tell people is, let's say you climbed Mount Everest, you would say, yeah, when I was on climbing Mount Everest last weekend, I had that same thought. You use it in a sentence. Or let's say you could say, last week when I swam the English Channel, I had this great idea, da, da, da. You just blend it into your conversations. You have to tell these people that you are active. It's very important, whatever you do. Walking. This morning on my 3-mile walk, I had this great idea. You know what I mean? So you have to talk about your active activities. Otherwise, they're going to think that they're going to be paying a lot for your doctor bills, that you're going to be out for doctor appointments, that you aren't going to be working a lot because you don't have enough energy. They worry about these things. And then the other thing is your technology. We have to make sure they know that you understand technology. Now, because of virtual interviewing, they know you understand technology because you can get on a Zoom call. You must understand technology. However, they don't know that someone didn't set it up for you, right? Your kid or your nephew might have done it for you. So you need to make sure they know that you understand technology, because as we get older, I don't know about you, but I'm more likely to want to give my technology work to someone else that's in the younger generation. So we might delegate a lot of our technology when we're vice presidents. So you have to demonstrate that you know technology in some sort of way. You can do it by mentioning that you have an iPad or something. Find a way to talk about technology. Mention Snapchat or Instagram or TikTok or anything like this, and they'll know that you're hip and with it with the technology. So I used to tell people when we had live interviews, I would tell people to bring your iPad with you and put it on the desk of the interviewer, and then they'll know that you know how to use an iPad. So this person, Leon, sent me a testimonial, and it says, as an over 50 job seeker and 2 for 2 in landing jobs after bringing an iPad with me on job interviews in the past year, I never even opened the iPad. I just had it with my portfolio during interviews. I'm an IT consultant. There you go. So now I want to tell you about my favorite story in this presentation, and it's about my Grandma Jean. So that's Grandma Jean and the flowers there. So every day she would wake up. This is the building she lived on, Ocean Parkway in Brooklyn. And every day she would take the elevator down to the ground floor. She would cross Ocean Parkway. This has 7 lanes of traffic, as you see. She would walk another 5 blocks to get to her senior citizen center, where she would work in the kitchen and serve seniors lunch. And she was paid to do this. And she did this until she was 95 years old. Every day. She was better than the postman. She went during rain, sleet, snow, every day, walked over to her senior citizen center. So I tell you this story because when you get older, you're going to have to address the age issue a little bit. because people worry that you're going to retire, because retiring equals quitting. So for me, I would easily have a story. So let's say I was 70 years old, sitting in an interview chair, and I felt that I looked 70. Now, I don't exactly look my age right now, but someday I'm going to look my age, and this is when I'm going to pull this rabbit out of the hat. But right now I'm good. But let's say I was 70 and I looked 70 and I had gray hair. Someday I'm going to actually have gray hair. Right now I color it. But I would say somewhere in the conversation, I would say, you might notice that I'm not 25, but I do want you to know that my grandma Jean worked until she was 95, and I plan on doing something similar. So do I think I'm actually going to work till I'm 95? No, but at least I make it sound like I'm going to be there past 70, because we really worry about this, that you're going to quit within a couple of years and retire. And then I'm going to have to start recruiting all over again for the position I just went through to find you. So you have to talk about not retiring during your interview. It's very important. Okay. So the next thing is, this one is where you're going to think I'm crazy. Being called overqualified is actually a blessing in disguise. So here is why. A lot of you at the beginning, when I asked you how you felt about whether you had been told you were overqualified, many of you said people told you were overqualified. Well, that's great, because if someone says you're overqualified, all you have to do is overcome the objection and tell them why you're not overqualified. You're absolutely overqualified. You're absolutely qualified. But what if they don't tell you? Well, that what happens is they think it. They don't say it because they think they're saying you're too old, because it's so correlated. They think by saying you're overqualified that they're saying you're too old. That's not good. So they don't say anything. So this is why it's a huge blessing in disguise if someone says you're overqualified, because then you can overcome it. Now, if somebody doesn't say it, I really need you to talk about it during the interview. I need you to say something like this. You can see I've worked at a higher level before, but this position is exactly what I'm looking for, and here's why. This is the elephant in the room, and I worked very hard to get an elephant in a room to put on this slide for you. But anyway, you say this or something like this during your interview, or at the end when they say, do you have any questions? You say, you can see I've worked at a higher level before, but this position is exactly what I'm looking for, and here's why. And then you tell them the here's why. Now, I recommend that you prepare your here's why before the interview. In other words, I want you to memorize your here's why before they ask or before you tell them, because you have to know this. So this is if you know you have too much education, too much salary, too much title, too much experience, any of these things, prepare a here's why. And we're going to talk about some now. When you get the slides, you're going to have extra ones. So that's why you definitely want to get the slides. None of these are going to match to you exactly. I can tell you that, but they're just ideas. So the first one is, I was proud to be a nurse manager, but I really miss working with patients as my main function. I've had the big salary and the big title, but now I just want to make a difference. Okay. So this is the nurse that goes to college, does a really great job, becomes a nurse, gets promoted and promoted and promoted, finds themselves, let's say, as a VP of nursing, and then gets laid off. And then they're thinking, I don't want to be a VP of nursing. I hate all the paperwork. I hate managing people. I just don't want to do this anymore. I just want to be a damn nurse. So what do? They become a nurse again, and they're a fabulous nurse. That's this one. So some of you may want to go backwards like that. So for me, it's exactly what happened. I was a senior director of recruiting for a company at some point, and I can't be a senior director of recruiting and also be absolutely Abby. It just didn't work. So that's why I'm a contract recruiter now. I do the recruiting myself. And that one worked for me. It might work for some of you. Now, the other thing is budgets. So you might have to say something like this. I understand the budgetary constraints of a nonprofit. My kids have graduated college, so I'm sure we can agree on a salary that fits your budget. So this person gave the example that the reason they don't need $200,000 is because they're not paying for their kids' school. You might have another example that you could use, like such as, my house is all paid up, or we moved from a house into an apartment or into an RV, for example. So things like that, or I won the lottery, or I invested well in the stock market. That's why I have $1 zillion in the bank, and that's why I don't need your $200,000. I can live on 97,000. So that might be something that some of you could use. And then the last one is about changing industries. So some of you, your industries kind of went out the window during COVID, or you don't want to be in that industry anymore, and you have to change industries or want to. In this case, you have to tell them the reason why you're not overqualified, you're absolutely qualified, is because you want to take this new position in this new industry. So I have a great example of this that worked like a charm in my case. And by the way, I'm just as much absolutely qualified as you all. So I didn't mention this, but I have the same issues that you do because I've got 26 years of experience. It's the same problem. So I'm in the same boat as you. So one year, I think it was 3 years ago, I was out of work in a summer, and I really always wanted to work in the entertainment industry, but I never had the opportunity. So I got this opportunity to interview at CBS, and I was deliriously excited because I love TV. So I looked at the guy in the face, and he said to me, what kind of income are you looking for? And I gave him the number, and he pretty much laughed at me. And so then I looked at him again and I said, listen, Rich, I really want to work at CBS. This is my favorite TV station. I love, and I mentioned some shows. It wasn't really true, by the way. ABC is probably my favorite network, or NBC, but whatever. I thought quickly, and I said, CBS is my favorite station. I love watching 60 Minutes and blah, blah, blah. And I am not concerned about the salary because I have always wanted to work for you. So please disregard the salary issue. And guess what? I actually got the opportunity, and I worked there for about 5 months till they were bought by Viacom. And it was wonderful. I loved it. It was a great experience. But I was able to convince him that I wasn't overqualified. I was absolutely qualified. And you can do the same thing. When you get the slides, you'll get some other examples there. Okay, now sometimes someone's going to say you're overqualified, and you could say some different things. If you have a Brooklyn personality, you could say this. If you were having open heart surgery, would you prefer a qualified surgeon or an overqualified one? I want you to think about this before I move to the next one. Seriously, think about it. You were told today that you need open heart surgery. Would you go to see a 25-year-old doctor, or would you prefer probably like a 60-year-old doctor or a 70-year-old doctor? I think I would go with the overqualified surgeon. For me, I would never go for the regular doctor. And then there's this. So if you were a passenger on a plane, would you prefer a qualified pilot or an overqualified one like Captain Sully? I don't know about you, but every time I walk into a plane, I look to the left and I see what the pilots look like. And if they have gray hair, I continue walking and I'm all happy. I don't want a qualified pilot. I want the most overqualified pilot I can get. In particular, Sully would be great. And then when you go to the beauty parlor, would you prefer a qualified hairstylist or an overqualified one? Or you could try, if you're a football player, would you prefer a qualified coach or an overqualified coach? So the thing with these statements is once you give one of these statements, there is going to be silence because they're going to be shocked that you said it. However, if you let them spin a little bit, they will eventually come back to you and say, wow, I agree with you. And they will continue the interview. If you break the silence, it won't work as well, but just try to let them think, because they will all come to the same conclusion that you make a lot of sense, right? I don't want a hairstylist that just started last year. I want one that's been doing this for 20 years at least, right? It's the same kind of thing. A football coach, same story. Pick one of these that makes the most sense and try it. See what happens. Just to prove that it works, I've got several slides like this. I'll give you 2 of them. This was from Donna. She said, when I interviewed for a job, the hiring manager told me I was overqualified for the position. I said, why settle for Chevy when you can have a Mercedes-Benz? I need very little training and I can hit the ground running. That was on Friday. By Monday morning, my recruiter told me he decided to drive the Mercedes-Benz. Love that one. And then I got one from Pam, and she said, I went into a recent interview and noticed the hiring manager's office was covered with pictures of his Air Force tour of duty. At the end of the interview, he told me I was overqualified. I held my cool and said, when you're a passenger on a plane, do you prefer a qualified pilot or an overqualified one? I start on Monday. Yippee! So these things do work. Then I went to Mountain View, California, and I met John Delaney. John Delaney says, overqualified is a judgment a manager makes assuming everything is going to go according to plan with no surprises. The captain sullies are trained for. So I said, John, that is the most brilliant thing I've heard all day. Would you like to come with me on my tour? And he said, no, but you can take my picture. So that is what happened. And then this chick was living in an RV, and she said, it's impossible to be overqualified unless you believe you are overqualified. Your success with overcoming objections that you are overqualified absolutely starts by changing your mindset. And if you agree with that, I now pronounce you absolutely qualified. The end. Before I go, though, I want to mention something pretty exciting that could help some of you. So during COVID last year, was it last year? 2 years ago, 2020. During COVID 2020, I was out of work. So I lost my job the same day most of you lost your jobs in March of 2020. And I was a contract recruiter at the time. So I was hoping eventually it would come back, and it did, but it took until September to come back. So I was out of work for 4 months in 2020. So during that year, I decided to join a headhunters network in order to get some income. And in this headhunters network, the story is that I can post all of their jobs, and if I fill any of their jobs, I get a little piece of the pot. So this is what I did, and I've continued to do this on the side. So now I'm back to doing contract recruiting again, but I'm still doing this on the side. So I just wanted to introduce you to this website because it is a way to look for jobs in places that you don't have jobs, that you can't find other jobs. Because with headhunters, they don't necessarily post their jobs on Indeed or LinkedIn. A lot of times they're just networking the jobs. They're just making phone calls, and you don't know about them. So it's basically the hidden job market that you've all been looking for. And there are 1,173 headhunters in my network right now. And there are 3,055 jobs available today. I looked on the website. So that's a lot of jobs. And every week we get probably 100 new jobs and 100 jobs get filled. So the number stays around the 3,000 range, but there's new jobs every day, literally. So today there are 65 jobs in New Jersey, 37 in New York, 128 in Pennsylvania, 35 in Connecticut. But this number here has grown. When I first joined the network, it was about 65 remote jobs, and now there's 530. So definitely you can go onto my website and click the button about remote and see all the remote jobs, and you might be able to find one of those in Alaska, for all you know, but it's still a job. Okay, so the way you get onto this website is to go to absolutelyabby.com/beacon. So it's absolutelyabby.com/beacon. When you go on there, I'm going to ask you to sign up on the website. And what will bounce back when you do this is my cover letter template, which I just told you about before. There's also a webinar on there. It's called Winning the Hearts and Minds of Recruiters that I did that about 6 months ago, I think. And then I also have a 26-page job search resource guide for you. And we have 3 Absolutely Abby Q&A calls. So that's to thank you for signing up on the site. So you can go sign up on the site, look at the jobs. If you see something, apply for it. If you apply for it, it's not going to be me that calls you. It's going to be that particular headhunter that has the job, and they'll be in touch. If I see that you applied and I think you look really good, I can call the headhunter and tell them to make sure they look at your resume. So I've done that before for people. And the other thing you might want to do is post your resume on my site, because headhunters can look at the resumes that are in my site and ask me if they could see the resume. So what they'll see is not the resume. They'll kind of just see the profile of you. Like they'll see the general stuff about you. And then they ask me for your resume. So I would call you and say, hey, someone's asking for your resume. Do you mind if I send it? So they won't see your resume. They'll just see a little bit about you. So I would put your resume in there just like you put your resume into Indeed, and let 1,173 people maybe look at it. So that's the good news about what I've been doing these days. So yes, I'm still on a mission to help 1 million job seekers, but nowadays I'm doing a lot more in the world of recruiting and speaking a lot less frequently, but now I can actually get people jobs, and that's really, really exciting to me. So I'm ready to take questions if you have them, and I can't see any of you, but I can take questions.
Okay.
So
Well,
Zoe, can you,
Mhm.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
There's a couple in the chat. One going back to when you were talking about the resumes, they're asking about, is it ethical to alter your job titles and listing less than the total experience years? Kind of what's the
Totally ethical to list less number of years of experience, because your resume is not your application. So in other words, when you fill out an application, you're basically saying this is all true, and that's something that can be held against you. Your resume, you don't mention what you had for lunch on your resume. You pick and choose what you want to put on your resume. So if you only wanted to have a certain number of years, it's totally legal to do that. Now, for me, I always felt like I'd rather them know the whole real person. So I chose to put all my years of experience on most of my resumes, but everybody has to do what they want to do. And then what was the other thing about the other half of that? So the
altering
resume,
the title.
well, the titles, that's a big problem. Okay, if you change your title and make it lower and someone finds out about that, they will not hire you. And they are going to do background checks, and they can ask your former employers what your title was. Really not alter your titles, really. But let's say you were a vice president of something. I think you could say that you were head of something. A lot of people call heads of things nowadays, and we don't know what that means. You could be the head of something and be a manager. So you could change your title and say head of, and then if somebody says, oh, I see you were the head of this, blah, 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 that's fine. Because if they call to check that, and someone says vice president, it doesn't feel to me like a lie. So I think you can get away with that if you want to do that.
So we had another question here. Has the current shortage of employees and the accelerating trend of baby boomers leaving the workforce lessened the difficulties of job search for the absolutely qualified professional?
I think it's getting a little bit better because there's so many companies looking for help. But there's still, at least for me as a recruiter, there's still a little bit of a mismatch between who's available out there and what I need to try to fill. So I think there's still a mismatch. So there's skill set mismatches. There's a lot of people out of work, let's say in the oil and gas industry, for example, and I can't hire any of them in the pharmaceutical industry because pharma wants pharma. And I do a lot of work in pharma. So there's a lot of a mismatch in who's out versus who people need. But I think that life should be a little bit better when it comes to the absolutely qualified employee. There should be more opportunities out there because there's more jobs open. And you can see that there are 3,000 jobs open on my site. So there's at least 3,000 jobs open that are real jobs.
Charlie, did you have a question? Hands raised. Charlie, did you have a question?
Bob's hand was up before mine.
I think Bob is just up from earlier. I don't know if he has a question.
Okay. Abby, thank you so much for sharing. Question.
You're absolutely welcome.
There's a lot of debate that recruiters like to see your picture with the open to work collar that green collar around your
Mhm.
picture on LinkedIn. Can you share
Yes.
with the group your thoughts on that? Especially when we're at this level of responsibility that
Mhm.
we've had, high level
Yeah.
people doing that. What are your thoughts?
I love when I see open to work because I know that you're open to work. And I know that when I reach out to you, you're probably going to write back to me. The most frustrating thing is I usually write to, let's say, 20 people a day, and I hear back from 3. It's very frustrating. So if you're open to work, I will look forward to writing to you because I'm going to assume that you're going to write back to me. We love to see open to work, so I would always recommend that you do that. But not if you're employed. You have to be unemployed in order to do that. If you're employed, your current boss is going to see it. So you don't want to do that.
So Abby, is there a difference? Because I know you also have the option of showing recruiters you're open to work.
Yep, you could do that too. You can do that too. But so every recruiter has a different level of LinkedIn. So the highest level of LinkedIn costs $10,000 a year for us to use. I don't use that one because I'm not a big recruiting company. So I use the $119 a year, a month, sorry, much more affordable for what I have to do. So I don't get to see that you're open to work. Only the people that are paying $10,000 a year get to see that. And not everybody is paying $10,000 a year. So that's why that green thing over your profile makes me happy because I could see those.
Okay. Abby, if I could ask you a question, I don't, unless Zoe, did someone else have a question first?
There's one more in the chat, but if you want to go and then we can ask that chat question.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to ask, how do you use, as a recruiter, how do you use the applicant tracking system or ATS, or do you?
I absolutely use it. How do I use it? So I receive resumes in there. People apply to ads that I post, and they go into the applicant tracking system. And that's where I keep track of all my applicants, and I can disposition them and all that. But I can also look through the applicant tracking system for past candidates that might be good for my current job. So I can use it in two ways.
And do you use keywords? Is that how you find people too?
Yep. Keywords and titles. And zip codes. Yeah, so that's the other thing is it's very important to put a zip code on your resume. You don't have to put your address, but at least a zip code so you don't get stuck in applicant tracking system la la land. Right? Because if I do a zip code search for, like, let's say I need to fill a position in Philadelphia, I'm going to put in a Philadelphia zip code because otherwise I'm going to get people in Oregon. I need people in the Philadelphia area, so I'll put the Philadelphia zip code. That's the only way I can find you. So it would really be good if you could put a zip code on your resume.
Great. The next question that was in the chat was, how do you find and introduce yourself to recruiters?
Oof. Well, let's say you're in a certain field like aerospace. I would get into a networking group with aerospace folks just like you and ask them who they use. That's really the best way to find recruiters, is to find other people that are like you. You can go online and look on LinkedIn. You can do a search under the word recruiter and you'll find many, 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 many recruiters there, but you won't know who the good ones are. And you won't know specifically what they do unless they post what they do. Some of them do, some of them don't. And also they call themselves headhunters because they like to find you. They don't necessarily want you to find them. So they're only going to call you back if they have something that really matches well with what you do. So this is why it's better to get referred by a friend into a headhunter.
Great. There was another question. In one of your examples, you mentioned a salary range of 75K to 120K. Is that broad of a range okay to put, or do you have, I guess it's just a general question about the range?
Yeah, you can put a broad range. It doesn't matter. For a cover letter, it doesn't matter. And that is a pretty broad range. So but I'm not sure what industry everybody's in. In the pharmaceutical industry, a financial analyst is probably a 90 to 110 type of role. But you have to figure out what the right range is. Now, whatchamacallit, payscale.com is my favorite one for salary ranges.
Okay, Zoe, I don't think there are any more questions in the chat, but maybe we could give everybody an opportunity, your last shot at Absolutely Abby, to get the absolute truth about job search or recruiting. And I'll give you guys a second to type in or raise your hand. But Abby, I do want to thank you. I think you lived up to the hype. You really not only gave great information, I think it was really practical. And I'm sure everybody on the call has something they can do right after they get off this call, if they haven't done it already, to improve their job search. And I also love, by the way, the fact that you clearly know what you're talking about, but you're also not arrogant in thinking that what you say is the only way. And I think your message that people have to do what's best for them is a great message as well. So thank you very, very much. And also for your generosity of all these resources you've offered to people. It's really been a great, great talk. So thank you.
Thank you.
Beacon is the premier executive networking organization serving the Mid-Atlantic region. To learn more, go to beaconforlife.org.